Good afternoon and welcome to the second hearing that I have convened on the humanitarian crisis that resulted from thousands of unaccompanied minors showing up at our southern border. I have been engaged on this issue from the beginning, not only as the chairman of this subcommittee, but also as a member of the Speaker's working group on the unaccompanied alien child crisis. I traveled with several of my colleagues to the region and saw firsthand the insecurity and the poverty that plagues the region. While the administration has cited drops in the total number of children traveling north since our first hearing on the topic back in June, the fact is that the conditions in El Salvador, Honduras, and Guatemala continue to be very grave. I convened this second hearing because my colleagues and I are mindful of the high levels of gang violence and the lack of opportunity right here in our hemisphere. Not only affects the lives of millions in Central America, but affects the United States too, as we have seen. Indeed, the pursuit of peace and prosperity throughout the Western Hemisphere should be a key national security objective of the United States. As Ronald Reagan said back in 1984, Central America is a region of great importance to the United States, and it is so close. San Salvador is closer to Houston, Texas, than Houston is to Washington, D.C. I have consistently been supportive of U.S. efforts through CARSI to assist the region to build capacity to strengthen their respective police forces so they can better confront the high levels of criminality brought on by gangs and drug trafficking organizations. Between 2005 and 2012, there was a 340% increase in murders of women and children in Honduras, while El Salvador maintains the world's highest rate of homicides against women and girls. Guatemala ranks third. There is widespread mistrust of law enforcement and impunity rates as high as 95%. In addition to the need for stepping up capacity building for law enforcement, all three of these Northern Triangle countries lack stable institutions and are plagued by corruption, so U.S. efforts to improve governance and democratic values are imperative. The question remains, however, and this is why I have convened this second hearing, in this time of tight budgets, are we evaluating each and every individual program that we fund, applying metrics and determining what works and what doesn't work? I had asked during the last hearing for USAID to provide me with specific program-by-program metrics, and to this date have yet to receive that information in its entirety. I am aware of the Vanderbilt study, a $3.5 million study to evaluate some of USAID's programs in the region. Unfortunately, the study does not provide us with project-by-project evaluations and cost-benefit analysis, and that may not be available right now. I have said this before, the U.S. taxpayer is very generous and wants to help the people of El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras find a path to peace and prosperity in their respective countries. However, they also demand that we spend their hard-earned taxpayer money wisely and achieve measurable results. As a result, we must acknowledge that previous programs in Central America have failed. Despite U.S. investments through CARSI, these countries continue to flail, and these failures ultimately contributed to the UAC crisis along our border. It is our responsibility and yours to ensure that going forward that we have very serious buy-in and political will from each of these three countries. And every agency involved in administering programs needs to be accountable for the effectiveness of each specific program. The goal is to help empower these countries to improve governance and build prosperity so that their citizens can prosper there. Unfortunately, the Obama administration continues to incentivize the mass exodus of citizens from those countries by changing immigration policy by decree. On Friday, Vice President Biden announced an in-country refugee processing program as part of a strategy to deal with the unaccompanied minor crisis. Now, at first glance, the idea is a very good one. We have all talked about the treacherous journey these children must make to get to our border. So offering those people who might qualify for refugee status the opportunity to apply in their countries would be a good way to dissuade them from otherwise traveling up our southern border. Upon closer inspection, however, it appears that this program is yet another example of President Obama's flouting of immigration law. This newly announced program allows family members present in the United States under varying statuses, including deferred action, to petition for children and spouses in Central America to be interviewed for refugee status. If they are ineligible, the newly announced program allows for humanitarian paroles on a case-by-case basis. It is very important that the State Department's Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration provided a witness answer to the many questions my colleagues and I have about this newly announced in-country processing, particularly to understand the criteria being applied to both refugee and parole eligibility. The answer to problems plaguing the region is not to further incentivize citizens of El Salvador, Guatemala, and Honduras to leave. Rather, we should double down on serious efforts to empower people of the region to achieve lasting peace and prosperity in their country. Using this crisis to attempt to curry favor for sheer political gain is wrong. Sadly, I believe that that might be what the President is doing. I'm looking forward to hearing from each of our witnesses about what their specific agency or bureau is doing to address the crisis with the seriousness that it deserves. And Assistant Secretary Jacobson, thank you for being with us today, Ms. Hogan and Ms. Kaplan. And Ms. Weisner, I'm pleased you're here as well. Look forward to hearing how assistance programs can be refocused on income generation and economic development to help provide empowerment and opportunity to the citizens of Central America. And anyway, I'd like to offer an opportunity for opening comments by my colleagues as well. Representative Duncan.